So many of you have seen our video with our practice molds showing what happens during the healing process if you deposit ink sideways. We've had so much response from it and so many people asking questions, well, how do you do a curved stroke if your needle's straight up and down? Or how do you do this with a U-blade? So we thought we'd come right back in and show you guys all the different needles and how to make a curved stroke while keeping your tool straight up and down. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat what I did on the first video in case you haven't seen it. When you're entering into the skin, right now I have a 12 flex loaded onto my hand tool. So when I'm entering into the skin, all needles need to be touching the same depth the entire pull. The reason for that, if I'm on the tip of my needle and that needle's going deeper than the rest of my needles in the skin, it's gonna heal deeper wherever that deepest needle is in the skin, right? So if you go too deep in the skin, it's gonna heal ashy, it's gonna blur out. So the second you enter the skin, all needles need to touch the exact same depth, the entire pull, and then you're lifting straight out. You're not flicking back and forth. If you're riding the very tip of that needle, it's like a razor blade. It's gonna go really deep. If you're making a pull and you see yourself falling back onto the butt of these needles, it's gonna go too shallow. So it's almost gonna look dented, not a really good crisp hair stroke in the skin. So again, the second you enter in the skin, all needles touching the exact same depth, the entire pull, and then you're lifting straight out. The second thing we wanna do is we don't wanna tilt our tool to the left or to the right. So a lot of times when we're writing with a pen, we tilt our hand and we start to write sideways. So I see a common mistake with a lot of girls is that they're tilting their tool to the sides. So a lot of you will notice that a lot of technicians, a lot of artists, they'll post their after work, but it's very rare they post their healed. Now ask yourself why? Why don't they post their healed? Well, they don't like the way that their healed turned out, right? So right after, when your client leaves, no matter how you deposited the ink, it's gonna look good. They can't see how it's gonna heal in the skin. But if you go sideways, it's gonna blur out. Let me show you why. So tool straight up and down. You don't wanna tilt to the right, you don't wanna tilt to the left. So you enter in the skin. Now, a lot of girls are like, well, how can I do a curved stroke if my tool's straight up and down? You're just rolling your fingers. Okay, I'm not pivoting with my wrist. I'm not using my wrist to make my curve. I'm rolling my fingers. So let me show you that again. So if I'm coming around to the front of them and I'm doing a push, I'm rolling. So I'm pushing with my thumb, pulling with my pointer, rolling that for my curve. And if I'm from behind them, I'm pulling, right? So as I'm getting my curve, I'm pulling my thumb and pushing with my pointer, and I'm rolling. So you should be just gently holding your tool so that you can roll it between your fingers. That's how you get your curve. You don't want to pivot it with your wrist. Now with this practice mold, this is not about depth. Okay, this is not a practice about depth. If you go too deep into this wax, it's gonna blur out on you and it's not gonna show you if you're holding your tool straight or not. So what this is about is controlling that hand pressure. So now I don't use a U-blade. I find it hard to go right back through my stroke if I have to hit my depth one more time. And I also feel like it's harder to control my depth with it. But I've had a lot of girls asking questions on, well, how can I use this mold to practice with a U-blade? Same way. So even if you're doing a stroke with your U-blade, you don't want to tilt it, right? You want to keep that straight up and down because common sense, if you tilt sideways, guess what's going to happen? Your ink is going to heal sideways. It's not that the ink is migrating, it's that you're placing it sideways in the skin. So keep your tool straight up and down. Now that's with a U-blade, right? Straight up and down, and I could still get my curved stroke. I'm rolling. But what happens if I pivot with my wrist and I tilt my hand sideways? Now, a lot of girls love a U-blade because they feel like it really helps them get that curved stroke in. But the same thing is gonna happen, you guys. They're gonna come back blurred out if you tilt your tool sideways. Make sure that that tool is straight up and down. You don't want to tilt to the right. You don't want to tilt to the left. Okay, and you want to watch and make sure all your needles are touching in that skin or in the wax the same depth the entire pull. You're going to lift straight out. Now, if you get one of these practice molds from us, make sure that before you wipe it, you take some Vaseline, you rub that in. Now, you're going to take a wet wipe, and you're just going to wipe that off. So, if you can see the strokes that I did straight up and down, they're nice and crisp. The strokes that we tilted sideways, they're all blurry. So that's what it's going to heal like in the skin if you tilt your tool sideways. Another fun thing you can do with this mold is you can practice your single needle strokes.